All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show with your host, Alex. And with how much he loves watching himself on the screen, it is Chris Jason Tyndall Condit, your American villain voices. And as always, serving up the lukewarmiest of lukewarm opinions. Go follow the socials linked in the show notes, Apple, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Got a little bit of a staggered cadence this week as I travel all over the country. God even knows where Chris is going to be. So I'll tell everybody now, this episode, we're going to recap Newcastle. We're going to preview City. Later on, we are also going to record our preview for Crystal Palace, which will come out later this week. So unfortunately, we'll not be able to include any insights from their Wednesday game against Arsenal, but just stay tuned to your feeds. Probably Wednesday, Thursday, that'll come out. Chris, happy Easter to you, my Christian friend. How are you doing? How was the ham? Marie Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette was excellent. She did a nice job. She said, let them eat steak, and we didn't. We ate her. I sat on that all day.
She met an honorable end is what you're saying.
That's right, yeah. Happy Easter. Hallelujah, he is risen. And, of course, I'm talking about Ollie Watkins, our savior in the Newcastle game. What a game. What a day it was.
You make that joke, but like quite literally about 3 days ago, we had him written off as dead as a Villa striker. That timing was quite impeccable.
No, but I mean, what a game, what a time, what a weekend. It was such a pleasure to watch that game, because even when it knotted up at 1-1, and obviously we'll get more into it, but it felt relatively comfortable the entire time. And it was great to see Villa play so well against such a good and informed team. And there are reasons why it all happened, and reasons of things that worked and things that did not work for Newcastle. But I was just so happy with the way everything went. And like, you couldn't have had a better 90 minutes against a better team at this point in the season.
Yeah, so let's I guess since you jumped right into it, I guess let's jump right into the recap and talk about some of those things that Villa have accomplished with their win, and some of the things that we actually learned about Newcastle. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily need a great transition here. So three big points that kind of came out of this. First, Aston Villa have now won 5 consecutive Premier League games for the first time since March-April 2023, so about 2 years ago. We have also won 6 home matches in a row in all competitions, each while scoring at least twice. Longest run of home wins while scoring 2+ goals since January 1990, which we actually did 11 times in a row. So we got a little bit of ways to go for that. Interestingly, for as good of a defense as they have, I think going into this match, they had like the 5th best defense in the Prem, Newcastle did. That's actually the 4th time they've conceded 4+ goals this year. The only teams with more than that, Ipswich, Leicester, and Southampton. 3 teams going down. Kind of surprising.
Yeah.
And then just interestingly, first time we've scored in the opening minute since April 21 versus Man City. Newcastle conceded in the opening minute for the first time since January 2019, also versus Man City. Kind of strange. A lot of Man City connections, because we're actually going to preview Man City next, and I saved this for later, but now I'll say it now. Last time we played these 2 teams, dominated City, wound up getting smacked by Newcastle. So hopefully that trend does not reverse.
Yeah.
Chris, let's dive into the game, though. We've talked about what a great win it was. Tactical setup, I think this was an Emery masterclass. But when the lineup came out and you saw the front 4, Rodgers, Asensio, McGinn, Watkins, and then also seeing Ian Maatsen at left back, what were you thinking?
Well, I was surprised at Maatsen, just given how early Luka Dean had come off in the midweek, but it worked out perfectly. And you and I had kind of talked about, I think, all of these iterations at one point or another. I think we didn't quite have this lineup ultimately, but we did kind of bounce around, especially me, because I think I had like 3 different lineups in the last preview. But I thought from a tactical standpoint, there were some surprises, most especially to me, Madsen being out there, Asensio and Watkins being out there together while keeping Rodgers out there. It seemed to me that there was a chance that you were going to get clogged up in the midfield, in the attacking midfield, I should say specifically. But like you said, it worked to perfection, and it may have been Emery's best game this season in terms of the way he set the team up. What did you think when you saw the lineup come out?
Emery's and Villa's. I said while we were at the pub, and I stand by it, that was our best 90 minutes all year long. I don't think that we've put together a more complete 90, even against relegation teams, than we did in that match yesterday. I was surprised. Asensio has not really been a consistent starter for us, definitely been more of the impact sub since coming over. Ollie Watkins, I expected Marcus Rashford to play again. Seemed like Ollie was on the out, hadn't one start in 6, I think, leading into this match. And again, someone so important and someone in such good form, I thought we were going to kind of continue. Maybe, with the quick turnaround to City, I guess maybe that was going into Emery's mind. I liked the Ian Maatsen inclusion. I think he's definitely made market improvements throughout the year, but like you, I had Luka Dean starting.
Did you not mention that Maatsen could come on though? Wasn't that did you mention you thought he might start?
I might have, honestly.
I thought you had that.
These things down.
Yeah.
What was probably more interesting to me, honestly, was who wasn't in the squad. So Emery spoke afterwards about this is the first time all year long that we've been so healthy that he's actually had to leave long-time inclusions out of the match day 18 or however many you can have nowadays. And so that was Lamar Bogard. I think not surprising, he hasn't really touched the field in half a year. But Pau Torres and Leon Bailey back healthy now. What do you think of Pau and Bailey in particular not making the squad for this one?
The exclusion of Pau was, I think, a bigger surprise than Bailey to me, just because Bailey's been sort of on the outs either for health or form for the last couple of weeks or maybe 2 months, and now that we are fully healthy, you can see why it's difficult to work him into the squad, or work not even just him, but work everyone into the squad, because we've got more options there now than we've ever had. And I think even if you look back at our discussions around the January transfer window and that time, we kind of talked about how we were stockpiling players that seemed to all play a similar position, or at least a similar range of positions. I mean, and one of those positions was attacking mid across the front, right? Whether it's left, right, or center. And the players now that we have that are in form and have played consistently, you can understand why Emery would go to them in front of Bailey at this point, not necessarily historically, but at this point in the season, the way things have gone, the way they've played, I get it. It's you and I are both big Leon Bailey fans, so that goes without saying. But I can understand the move. The Pau one, I guess if you're looking at it for purely rest, we didn't end up needing him. I was surprised just because he's been such a long-time key player for us in the last 2-3 years, however long he's been here. And Unai Emery has used him so consistently. I didn't expect him to not even make the side. So for me, out of the three, I should say, because Bogard didn't surprise me at all, but out of the three, Pau Torres was a big surprise that he wasn't in the squad.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. With both these guys you mentioned, at least with Leon Bailey, but with Pau as well, we've had some recurring injuries throughout the year. So can he really go 90 minutes, multiple days in a row on 3-4 days rest? Maybe not. And so maybe that's part of the thinking is he's kind of a break glass in case of emergency player. And when you look at the game against Newcastle, probably maybe not one that Emery expected us to get. Kind of a free hit, right? We're more focused on the remaining 5. And so why risk him in that match? I think he'll be very important against Man City, for example. Leon Bailey, same thing, like finally makes the bench, I believe, against PSG. But again, recurring injuries all year long. You just kind of leave him out because there's so many other guys, to your point, that can do what he can do. And then when you look across the back line, Axel Disasi, obviously a little bit more positional flexibility to play right back, to play center back. You've moved Kamara into that left center back role before if something happens to Tyrone Mings. So Pau, he's got one position, whereas those other guys have more. If you're cynical about it, I don't think you can be cynical about Pau. Emery has made his feelings on him clear. You can be cynical about Bailey. It was a very nondescript injury that has kept him out for a month and change now. No real great updates about what was wrong, why he was taking so long. And now for him to be out of the squad entirely, I mean, a cynic would say he's on his way out of the team. I think that's probably going a bit far, knowing that we have not necessarily signed Asensio or Rashford permanently yet. But that is something that at least I'm gonna monitor the relationship between him and Emery. We've talked in the past about the faith that we think Emery has in him, but as you have rightfully said, got to be hard to play for Unai Emery because at the end of the day, he's just going to do whatever is necessary to win. No feelings involved there. So let's put them aside. Let's focus about the guys that did play. And let's talk about the first 19 minutes. I wrote it as first 20, but it's the first 19. Both teams get lucky, but to your point, Villa were definitely, I think, the more comfortable of the two. First minute, Ollie matches Gabby for most Premier League goals. Obviously, a massive deflection, wrong foot's Pope. Probably, I think, covering it if it goes straight through his legs, but technically on target, and so that is technically Ollie's goal. Interesting to see the celebration from him after speaking, or I should say after the match, then speaking about how pissed off he was at being left out of PSG. And then luck goes the other way. So Newcastle hit back through Fabian Schär on that header on what I think you and I both believe was a phantom foul called against Boubacar Kamara. Ball gets cycled around. You can talk about Ollie a little bit if you want now that he's kind of tied that record, but I want to ask you about the second goal. Do you think Emmy should do better there to not get beat 5-4?
I actually think watching the goal back that it was a bit of bad luck by Martinez because he does, I think, a nice job to close the angle, and Schär just happens to get a head on the ball and it dives straight down. I mean,
it does exactly what you're supposed to do with it.
Yeah,
fire right at the feet
into Emmy's 5-hole, and like it's near post. That's the only place he can go, and Schär does a really perfect job to beat him. So maybe Martinez should have done better, but I think he closed the angle pretty well, and he was making himself big, and you can't make yourself big and cover between your legs at the same time because he's trying to make sure that he doesn't get beat left or right. And sometimes you just have to say they were better in that instance, and he was.
That's exactly where my head goes. I mean, best keeper in the world, you want him to make that save, but sometimes you gotta just say, kind of like I just said, that's exactly what you're supposed to do with that header because that gives you the best opportunity to score.
Yeah. And I mean, we at least have to mention Schär is probably a little bit fortunate to be on the pitch at that point, only because, and you and I agreed when we were talking about it, that it was that his foul that was ultimately given as a yellow was probably okay for us as a yellow, but also whatever was called on the pitch, whether it was yellow or red, was going to stay that way. And we've certainly seen that foul given as a red in other games this season and seasons previous. So I'm not here to debate that.
I was just going to say, I think on that one, he grabs him at the last possible moment to get a yellow where Ollie is still kind of in front of him, or I should say like in between him and the ball, right?
Yeah.
If Ollie gets the other side of him or even sideways with him, then he's pulling down a player that's ahead of him. That to me would be more likely to be a red card. So
I think my larger point is you could see it given as a red, and we have, but when I say he, I mean Shar in that instance, just does a perfect job with it, and Martinez gets beat. You'd like to see him do better, like you said, but like we said in the preview, Newcastle are really good, and they were one of the best informed teams in the division and in Europe at the time we played yesterday. So we can't just act like that doesn't exist and they all of a sudden are a bad team that we just smoke all the time, because that's not the case. Yeah, so I would like to see Emmy do a little bit better, but at the same time, a lot of it he did very well. He closed the angle, he got big, he just got beat.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So we were wrong. Ollie's breaking this record, right?
He made us look really dumb because he could have had 3. I mean, how the second didn't go in and hit Woodwork in the right at the 90, right? Like it hits right here. That was incredible, and he's really unlucky that ball doesn't go in and he doesn't break the record right there. But he played very well, played what looked to be angry, and that was confirmed by his post-game interview. And so maybe he should, be benched for a couple of games every now and then, just to remind him, this is who you need to be, because give me that guy every single day. He was hungry. He worked. I mean, don't get me wrong. His work rate is always great. But you could sense something watching him yesterday.
This was the strongest he's been mentally, I think.
Yeah, that he was pushing in a way we haven't seen much this season.
I agree. And so that kind of transitions into the rest of the first half. Both teams certainly had their opportunities. I think Villa more so, and that's evidenced in the expected goals at halftime. But Villa almost immediately after the goal have that combination between McGinn. Maatsen puts in a great cross on the ground for Asensio, who honestly almost feel like it's harder for him to fire that wide than it would be to put it on net and put it in. Yep. I have a question for you about him in a second, but yep. Ollie, as you said, hits the bar twice. Tonali had a great long-range effort that Emmy gets down to. Isak had a couple opportunities that we were able to get men in front of. It seemed like it was going end to end, everybody getting shots, and seemed much more even. Now halftime, Villa shades at 1.04 expected goals to 0.59 for Newcastle. But let's rewind to Asensio for a second. Got the start, whiffs there. Last week misses 2 penalties. Has he been good since that flurry of goals that he has, or are we looking at a bit of a Coutinho situation with like a bright start and a little bit of a taper off?
I think there's some tapering. Coutinho maybe a strong way, but like only because they're both loanees in that spot. The comparison makes sense. The player I would actually look at more is Diaby, Moussa Diaby, even though he was a permanent buy. Where if you remember, Diaby came on and was lights out from jump when he came on board for about the first 5 to 8 games, and then fell off quickly. And I think we may be seeing something like that. So if I can make a point I think you made about Diaby, it's that I think that Asensio, when he came on, was playing very instinctually, just playing the way he feels like or likes to play. And the more ingrained he gets in Emery's system, there's actually an adjustment period that occurs. We saw the same thing with several players not just Diaby, but he, I think, is the most apt comparison here. And I think we're seeing a bit of a regression because there's a lot to think about as you're playing in Unai Emery's system: spacing, movement. I mean, it's detailed and detail oriented. So you can see things sometimes that look like they'd be easy, or at least easy for a player of Asensio's caliber to make, like that goal, or at least to put that ball on net. All of a sudden are not as easy as they would appear. That's my only potential explanation for it, because we know there's a player in there, and he's really, really good, but he's struggled the last handful of games for sure.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that's a very well-reasoned take. So let's jump ahead to the second half. I would say the first major warning out of Villa, 61st minute, McGinn, great run behind the center backs, perfect through ball. I don't know how he only shoots that at Pope's gut,
Right.
but he does. And then 64th to 75th, it seems like Villa are making a habit of scoring goals in quick flurries. So 64th, just absolutely play through the press as Newcastle begins to tire. Maatsen with a beautiful run and finish, just back to front, really quick, great turns, great finds by everybody. Maatsen again then tees up Yori in a great area, own goal off Dan Burn. And then finally in the 75th, Amadou Onana with a strike into the upper 90.
Yep.
Villa honestly kept their foot on the gas, could have had more. To say it was 4-1 probably flattered the visitors a little bit, and they comfortably see out the win. What did you think as these just goals just kept rocketing in over and over and over again?
So I have 2 points that I want to make. One, piggybacking off of you, the habit of scoring goals in bunches is, I think, a really positive thing, because it's, at least in this stretch that we're in right now, where we're 6 or 7 unbeaten, and 19 unbeaten at home, instead of scoring and then bracing for the response, which did happen right in this match, but then when we see adjustments made, it's Unai Emery on the front foot of the adjustments, and the team responding and really doing a nice job of putting their opponent to the sword and not letting off. So scoring in bunches helps that issue we had in the last year and the early part of this year, where we conceded, out of halftime and conceded late in games. So it's a good way to avoid it by just burying teams under attack. And that's exactly what we saw against Newcastle. The second point I want to make is Ian Maatsen. Those 2 goals, his goal and the goal he set up, which was the own goal by Dan Burn, that's the reason that you signed him and paid for him. And that's the reason
And the almost assist to Marco Asensio, by the way. Throw that
right.
into
Yep.
this hat as well.
I mean, the movement and instinct to make the overlapping run on the goal, that is why Unai Emery wanted him, right? That play right there is a great example of the player Unai Emery wants out of that left back, because he just instinctually reads the movement and bombs forward as fast as anybody on the pitch at that point in the game, and finds a perfect angle to score that goal. And same thing on the other, on the own goal, whatever we want to call that, almost assist. I know you said the almost assist to Asensio, but technically maybe an assist on the own goal. Like, it just
Should be.
He has such an ability to force the defense to react to him, and we can really overload that left side. And you can see why I think he's going to become an important player as we move forward. To me, he's one of those guys like Tielemans and Onana, Kamara, Rodgers, like that. That's the core of players going forward, because they're all in their early to mid 20s. And those are the guys that Emery is moving forward with. And I think Maatsen's going to play a huge role.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because something we've danced around and I think discussed semi directly on a few of the pods is when are Villa at their best? And it is when they can get going quick, playing through the lines fast, and get teams rushing while they attack, right? But I want to add a wrinkle onto that actually. In that Villa are at their best when they have players who can beat a man and force everyone else to react. To use a comparison to an American sport, it's like in basketball when you dribble or get like a good pass, and so then the defense has to rotate and you find the open shooter, right? Villa are at their best when they have someone like a Morgan Rogers, like a Marcus Rashford, like a Jacob Ramsey to an extent, or like an Ian Matson, who is willing to take a guy on, beat a man, and force the defense to react to that. They're often then facing their own net. Someone's getting the byline. They're playing a cutback, and that's where you can find open men to shoot. You saw it with Marcus Rashford, how he scored against PSG. And you see that a little bit with Ian Matson. He's got an ability to dribble that I'm not saying at all that he's better than Luka Dean or that we should bench Luka Dean, but it offers something different over there. He's another guy that is willing to take on a man. And so I think having these, we talked in recent weeks about some of the positionless football that Unai Emery seems to be coaching out of Villa's kind of front four. Throw Ian Matson in there as someone who can kind of jump up on the wing and play positionlessly with some of the other guys around him. So I think that's a really good point that you made there about his future importance to Villa's development over the coming years. That's kind of all I had for the match itself. But one thing that, to remain lukewarm about this, it was your man crush, Jason Tyndall in the opposite dugout, not Eddie Howe, and I do think that played into Villa's hands a little bit.
100%.
Tyndall was slow to react to Villa's obvious pressure to get Anthony Gordon in there and potentially stretch the field a little bit. I also just thought their overall tactics and inability to adjust was surprising. I remember turning to me in the bar and saying, they are going nonstop down our right-hand side. And they were. I don't remember them using their right side at all, which is shocking when you consider the fact that on their left is Livramento. On their right is Kieran Trippier and Jacob Murphy, who's their second top scorer goal getter after Alexander Isak by only a couple goals, or goal involvements, I should say. So the fact that those guys couldn't get a sniff, especially knowing Ian Matson struggles in defense and was getting so far forward. I guess, I know how you feel about Tyndall, but still, are you surprised that he failed to kind of react and adjust quicker? Or do you think that they just really thought, hey, we're Newcastle, we're on such a run, we're the best team in the league, we're just going to impose ourselves on this game?
I think two things. I think that number one, if you ask anybody, including any Newcastle fan, who's a better manager, Unai Emery or Jason Tyndall, they're going to tell you Unai Emery, right? And second, I think that perhaps Tyndall and whoever came up with the game plan underestimated Matty Cash. Because like we have to take our hat off to Cash. The way he played yesterday, he was lights out. I don't remember him putting a foot wrong in that game, and they went consistently at him. I was surprised by it. I think that's one of the reasons that you saw the flurry of goals after the half, because then you have Unai Emery making adjustments at the break. Whereas Tyndall, I don't want to take anything away from him as much as I crush the guy. He's not the manager, and you can't expect a guy like that to be able to outclass Unai Emery when it comes to tactical management. It's just not going to happen. I was more surprised, I think, at how their midfield, which is very good, one of the best in the league. If you on their best day, maybe the best in the league. Yesterday was certainly not their best day, they got played off the pitch by Villa's midfield, which we also think is one of the best in the league, right? But it wasn't close. I mean, Bruno was chasing the game the entire day.
Bruno could have been red carded twice.
Right. So I think to an extent, we really have to give credit to the way Villa played and just forced Newcastle back on their heels for almost 90 minutes. At least 70 minutes out of the 90, was Villa just constantly beating Newcastle through the midfield and forcing an attack. And I have to tell you, to me, Nick Pope actually played relatively well. Like he made some great stops, stops. He faced 100 shots, and I'm not too far off with that, So you can't do more, I don't think, than he did. It's not like you sat there and said, "Oh, well, Pope should have done better on this, that, or the other." He just eventually some of those when you face, I think it was 23 shots, 9 on target or 10 on target. Some of those are going to get through. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, so you kind of hit it right there. Talking about Newcastle and the midfield and all that kind of stuff. I mean, another tactical masterclass from Unai Emery. There was an article that the Premier League put out that talked about how McGinn and Rodgers kind of drifted in to almost have this 3-man overload on Tonali. I will take a little bit of umbrage with the article saying that this is the first time that Villa have ever done that. You and I would complain constantly earlier this year about how we felt like we were too narrow with our attacking midfielders. That being said, clearly worked yesterday. Our ability to play through their more attacking eights in Guimaraes and Joe Linton and just force them into foul after foul after foul. You saw in his reaction to the foul calls how frustrated Bruno was at his inability to impose himself on this match. And I agree with you. I think he's one of the best midfielders in the division, and Newcastle certainly has, top 4 midfields in the league, probably easily. I was also kind of surprised at the fact that Newcastle just looked so tired. I remember Isak making a run late in the second half that ultimately went out for a throw. And I mean, he was doubled over, huffing. Considering Villa played BSG, arguably the best team in the world earlier this week. I don't know what Newcastle has to complain about being tired about. They haven't had Champions League all year long. So that also kind of surprised me. And then I think the last good point that I have before I turn it back to you is just the fact that we talked about this at the outset with Unai leaving guys out. Everyone is healthy for this stretch run of 6, hopefully 7 matches. And that's all we need. Everybody's in tip-top shape. And so that gives Unai all the tactical flexibility that he needs to approach each match in the way that he feels is best.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'll piggyback on that is we mentioned in the last pod when we were talking about what's the difference in Villa right now. And the biggest thing right now is that everybody's healthy or mostly healthy. We're as healthy as we've ever been this season. And I remember talking to Keith at the pub, shout out Keith, one of our most faithful listeners, about that, because we were talking and I said, I really think the biggest thing is health. Like everybody's there and available. And to the other side, Newcastle's not injured, right? They don't have a bunch of injuries piling up, but their fans are quick to point out that was the 6th or 7th straight game that they played the same starting 11, and that they only have about
poor management, though.
What's that? Well, they only have about 14 or 15 players that they can play, against a Premier League side. And I would only point out, like, we are in the same boat as them. Like, they have wealthier owners than we do because their owners are the crown
country,
Saudi Arabia. Murderers. What? Ours are very wealthy individuals, then we can't spend money because we both are up against PSR concerns. The difference is that I think if you look at the way Villa have managed their payroll and squad and all those things, it's a tale of two teams. Newcastle have largely held on to the players that they brought in, whereas Villa have sold off big players and brought in others at either on loan or for free or for low cost buys or mid cost buys. So like if you only have, as I saw one or two tweets say as I was looking through everything, 14 or 15 players that are good, that's your problem, man. Like you have
Yep.
to we sold players and bought players. This is the game. I we can talk all day long whether it's fair or not, blah blah blah, and one day we'll do a pod probably in the summer about what I would rather see, and what we would rather see from the Premier League. But this is the system we're in. We are legitimately looking at in the mirror at each other in terms of the come up and how we handle it. But the paths have diverged in terms of how the clubs have opted to handle it.
Yeah, I think that's really astute by you, and I look forward to that conversation in the offseason. I have nothing to add, so we'll just move straight into larger implication on the season. 5 matches to go plus the FA Cup. We are playing our best ball all year long. We said this was our best 90. I stand by that.
Yep.
Saw something earlier today that said that we were the form team in all of Europe's top 5 leagues right now over the course of our last 8 to 10 matches. We unfortunately, because Fulham could not help us out at all, we are still in 7th. We are level on points with Forest. They have 1 match in hand, plus 7 goal difference.
Come on, you Spurs. Come
on. Also level on points with Chelsea. They have a plus 18 goal difference to our plus 6. And 1 point back of Man City, who is our next match on Tuesday. So let's jump ahead to that one, Chris. Last time out was back when City were terrible, and it was a different world. John Duran had scored in 6 straight appearances. City were losing to everyone. We were talking into this game about adopting a mid-low block, hitting hard on the counter. Unai listened to us. I think City were starting plenty of guys out of position in the defensive line. They might have been starting 4 center backs at that point because they were super injured. We held City to mostly crosses and a late consolation goal. Devastated them through Yori Tillema, who we named man of the match, and Rodgers and John Duran really praised his defensive effort in that game. So, City more recently are doing a lot better than back then. It's hard to judge, though. They're technically unbeaten in 6, but what's the nature of those 6 matches? They've taken a while to break down Everton yesterday that I don't think anyone rates all that highly in what ultimately was a 2-0 win. They've drawn 0-0 versus Man United, who only just became mathematically safe from relegation today. But then on the flip side, they put 5 past Palace. Now, granted, so did Newcastle, but still, scoring 5 goals is big. And yet, as I look back at their results, they have the losses versus Real Madrid. They had the 5-1 to Arsenal, which I think they actually won on XG or came close on XG. They lost to Liverpool. There's no real great results there since they beat Newcastle 4-0 on February 15th. So they're just kind of drifting listing. And yet, this is still City at the Etihad. But since basically January, they just look kind of bang average. You look at everything. There's no pattern here. They put up huge XG sometimes, but usually that's just against bad teams. But they also give up decent expected goals against good teams. Sometimes you would say that they're lucky. Sometimes in the case of the 5-1 Arsenal, you'd say that they were unlucky. I really don't know what to make of them. The only difference home versus away, they have same possession, same amount of shots. They just don't convert them. They have 10 fewer goals away versus home. So, they are a little more prolific where we're going. Do you know how to predict this one?
Not really. The one thing I'll say is it must be really nice. And everything you said is accurate, but it must be really nice to be called bang average and be in European places, in Champions League places. Right. So they're not the city that we're accustomed to is a good way to put it. And they're not. I think in the first game we talked about, and I think I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I think I brought up specifically, and many people have, the loss of Rodri in the middle has really affected them defensively. And you and I can understand that because we know what a loss it is in the middle of the park if we're going to lose one of those two, Yuri Tielemans or Boubacar
We talked
Kamara.
about it last week with Kamara coming back, being a big factor in the turnaround.
It's a huge loss, and despite the players that they've bought and all those things, and I understand that's a whole nother ball of wax, they don't have the depth they once did. And we talked about that in the preview of the last match as well. They're just not, like, they're bringing on a Jack Grealish who looks washed. And I love Jack Grealish, and washed may not be the right way to put it. He doesn't look near the player that they bought, and that was only a handful of years ago. And it's just not the same city. Now, that not the same city is still right now going to be in Champions League. So it's not that bad either, I think my little ramble right here is kind of proven. No, I don't know how to call this one. I don't know how to predict it because I could see it go any number of ways, including them totally dominating this game and winning 4-2 or 3-1 or something like that, or Villa coming out and putting 4 past them, and it's a cruise home, or a dogfight. You could see any of those outcomes with the way both teams have been playing.
The interesting thing for them, to that point that you're on, is I haven't looked too deeply into this because we had so many matches to preview today, but I'm curious where the goals come from for them. And I know they just put 5 past Palace. But when you look at their scoring, Haaland once again has 21 goals, and he will not play. He's out until mid-May. They won't have Nathan Ake, and they actually won't have Ederson in the back either. Not that Ortega is any slouch in goal. But after that, you're looking at Foden, who's finally clawed his way to 7 goals as their second leading goal scorer. Omar Marmoush, the big winter signing, has 6 in the league and 7 in all competitions, but 3 were in the rout of Newcastle. He has scored 3 in their last 5. Their 4th leading goal scorer is their half left back, half center back, Guardiola, with 5.
Yeah.
James McAtee has 3 off the bench. They've certainly spread it around a little bit, but it's not like there's Haaland with 21 and, someone right behind him, even pushing the teens. So I'm very curious to see offensively what they do. And you rightly pointed out, no Rodri defensively. They're just not going to be the same team that they can be got at. So I think this is another really interesting one to see what Unai Emery tries to do. I think it'll be a similar chess match to what we had earlier in the season. But Chris, what are you expecting out of Villa and Unai Emery?
I think the same. I'm not 100% on the lineup that I've put together, but given the fixtures that we have coming, I'm trying to figure out the balance that Emery's going to strike. So here's what I went with. It's Emi Martinez in goal. It's still Cash, Konsa. I think Pau is back in playing and starting. And I think Luka Dean starts as well. Kamara and Tielemans, because I don't think that's going to change in this situation. And Tielemans looks like he's going to start as many games as he possibly can this season. In the attacking midfield, I have Ramsey, McGinn, and Rodgers with Rashford up top. But I don't know that that's going to be the way they work, but I do think that front line makes a lot of sense against what is going to be I don't know if depleted is the right way to put it, but a vulnerable City defense. And like you said, not their number one keeper, but also not a slouch, but still a depleted defense and a team that can be got at. I think you go with aggression there. You have Rodgers. McGinn is sort of the settling presence, but also can play on the turn and all those things that he can do, dropping deep a little bit. And I think Ramsey not just because, but because I think Bailey will be in the side, but will not start and maybe come on as a sub. And I think that Ramsey has actually started to play some of his best ball of the season in the last handful of games. So that's my logic behind that lineup.
I think I'm with you step for step. So I'm just going to provide two potential wrinkles that we could see to consider. One would be Ollie Watkins for Marcus Rashford again. I think that Ollie's ability to press, knowing that City will still likely have a lot of the ball, especially at home, they're going to have 60+% possession, will be important, particularly over the first 60 minutes. Then you can bring Rashford to run at tired legs and potentially beat a guy. But I'm with you. I think Rashford's ability to attack with pace on the counter is going to be important at some point in this game, whether he starts or whether he comes on. The other wrinkle that we could do is mirror what we did against PSG and have Yori play further forward with both Kamara and Onana shielding the back line, particularly with Pau there, a little bit more strength, repel a few headers. And again, just kind of knowing how City is going to want to play through the lines there, bringing in an extra defensive midfielder could be interesting. I think over the past couple of games, Yori has actually been really effective in that second striker role. You saw the great run that obviously led to Dan Burns' own goal against Newcastle, which I will admit was right after I called for Unai to bring in Onana and push Yori forward. But otherwise, I very much agree with your lineup. I would expect Villa to, much like they did in the first match, adopt a mid-lower block, defend well, kind of like we did against Paris, bide our time, and then attack quickly in waves going forward. I think that's the most effective way to get at City, get at that back line. And I think that gives us the most protection to prevent what is a limited, at least what is proven to be this year, a limited attack going forward from Man City. Just don't really give them the great opportunities to take advantage of and get themselves rolling.
So what do you have for a final score, given all you've predicted here?
2-1 Aston Villa.
So I'm in the same boat, but had you asked me 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, I probably would have said 2-1 Man City. Given the run of form we're in, given the health that we have, it's tough to pick against us at the moment.
It is very tough to pick against us. It is interesting to see the last few games of the season. I think Man City has the benefit as we go out of playing 4 teams that are really stuck in that 10th to 15th mid-table malaise, likely on the beach. So I see them winning 4 of 4 after this. We need to win if we're going to catch them. If we get a draw, it's not going to be enough because I do see them winning out. But the rest is for us to see on Tuesday. So, Chris, anything else that you want to add to this one before we close out and then hop back in for a Crystal Palace preview?
Shh, you're not supposed to tell people that. This theater of the mind, I was going to change shirts and everything.
It's all smoking. All right. Well, like I said, we are about to record Crystal Palace, but it isn't going to come out until later this week. So stay tuned for that one. But until then, up the Villa.
Up the.
Hi, Mom and Dad.